Hi, so my name is Anya Hockenberry. Today I'll be reviewing a journal article entitled Classroom Teachers' Implementation of the Social Stations Intervention to Improve the Verbal Initiations and Responses of Students with Autism. Now, this article focuses on students with autism who specifically have some struggle with verbal expression. Uh, I was prompted to choose to explore this particular area of special education because I spent about 2.5 years of my college career tutoring this one student with autism one-on-one in math and science, and he expressed himself verbally very much excessively, to the point that he had difficulty carrying on a conversation because he did not leave much room for anyone to respond. And oftentimes I had to butt into the conversation with questions or just commenting on what he was saying in order to even feel like I was being included in his inner monologue. And he had a very unique way of expressing himself, and I wish I had had some guidance, such as provided by the authors of this article, to help students with autism express themselves, but also reciprocate and carry on a conversation as part of a relationship instead of that inner monologue. As well as this article explores students with autism who struggle to express themselves verbally at all. Oftentimes, students with autism will either express themselves too much, which is the case of two of the students in this study, or they will struggle to express themselves at all. They'll have a language deficiency, which is the case of 3 students in this article. But we'll go ahead and jump into what this is all about. As soon as I realize how to go to the next slide. Perfect. So, in an overview, this study focused on students with autism who required conversational support. So, students here, 2 of them, like I stated before, had average language abilities. They tended to over-initiate and talk about their own interests and themselves, whereas 3 of such students did not express themselves much orally at all. And as it went, the researchers and the teachers were seeking to help students both initiate conversation, respond to other peers, as well as stay on task with their talking. Now, they were using something called the Social Stations Intervention, which paired a student with autism with a trained peer mediator. So they were using the peer mediator structure. And as it went, the 2 were talking about either a book or a topic that had been gone over in class. This was following general instruction. Either talking about a read aloud, talking about a science concept that they had studied, perhaps a social studies article that they had read as a class, and they were just prompted to talk about it. They had some cue cards that encouraged them about some sorts of things to say, like, what did you think about the article? What are your feelings about this book? What did you already know about this? What was something cool that you learned? General cue cards to just keep the conversation up and running. As well as in the first round of intervention, they used an iPad app, Puppet Pals, in which they recorded their conversation and animated puppets describing what they were saying. These scaffolds were removed over 3 installations and 20 whole sessions. There were 10 students, 5 pairs of 2. Now, by the end of the article, students were expected to improve their ability to initiate and respond on topic, as well as decrease their off-topic conversation. Pretty much within the first installation, there was no more off-topic conversation, so the researchers stopped measuring it, as well as 4 out of 5 of the students saw drastic improvements with their on-topic initiation and response. There was one student that did not see such improvements, but looking at his graph, he started out the student in question started off very high with their on-topic initiation response and then dropped with the intervention. So supposedly when the intervention is removed, the student will go back to their initial levels. Overall, the social stations intervention was seen to be to give positive results for the objective of creating on-topic conversation with both initiations and response. Now, the authors did not explain the interventions or even the students that were in the study very much. Instead, they focused on the teacher side of it. They lamented that a lot of research about students with autism, as well as general special education research, is done in isolated classrooms and with researchers instead of classroom teachers. And thus, the data that is produced is not easily replicable in the classroom, which well, we'll get to my personal opinion in a moment. But the authors wanted to conduct a study about students with autism that classroom teachers, both in inclusive settings and self-contained settings, could legitimately replicate and use within a day or a week after reading the study. Next, the authors believe that oral language training should be linked with academic work. Oftentimes, their perspective was that oftentimes conversational support is provided by a speech pathologist, by a guidance counselor, and that students in the special education program have so little experience actually communicating with a classmate conversationally, either being academic or being like in the more social setting. And especially for students who struggle to communicate verbally at all, this is a great hindrance because in the real world, students aren't going to be just answering questions from a teacher. That's not the kind of oral communication that skill that they really need to possess. In order to transfer to the real world, to a real world setting, they need to be able to communicate with their peers as well as maintain relationships. So the authors suggested naturalistic settings and style trainings were best for students with autism. And this was actually something I enjoyed exploring in another study. I was interested to see what other interventions were given to improve communication, because this focused just on topic initiations and responses for like academic settings. But I was curious about how that would apply to more social settings or purely academic settings. And there turned out to be three different like methods for helping students improve communication. One of them would be the didactic method, which uses an operant conditioning, like you do the right thing, you get a reward, you do the wrong thing, there is no reward. Another was the pragmatic, which emphasized communication instead of speech. So using hand signals, using gestures, using objects to communicate what you need, instead of focusing solely on, are you speaking complete sentences? Are you using vocabulary? Is what you're saying making sense using conventions of speech? Versus what the authors purported, which was the naturalistic setting, using the usual environment and functional approaches to teach real-world skills. Their conclusions with that were that social stations are effective for all students, regardless of language ability, both general ed and students with disabilities. They noted that the general ed students who had been trained as peer mediators benefited from the program, as well as the students with autism who greatly improved their initiation and responses. Now onto my personal opinion. Two positive ones. First off, after reading through the author's handbook, this intervention is clearly replicable. The instructions are clear and motivation is built in, and none of the materials are hard to get. You also do not have to purchase many of the materials. Puppet Pals or programs that are similar to it are available on most school iPads, and most public schools at least are on one-to-one technology right now. And the same author who headed up this study, I'm going to say her first name wrong. She's a researcher in Australia, Bronwyn M. Sutton. She's the main researcher for the article in question. She also authored a study that goes over just how to implement the social systems. And reading over this in conjunction with the article, and the guide only takes like 15 minutes to read, it's very clear that once the teacher teaches how to use this system, it can be replicated for all subjects. Students can use this conversation method to talk about social studies, science, their personal lives, discuss what they've been reading, discuss grammar, discuss any other social skills or positive action. But once the system is in place, the teacher can use it across the subjects, which is another one of the things suggested by the communication strategies, is that naturalistic inventions can occur throughout the school day, whereas those more didactic programs can occur every now and then to teach more difficult skills that perhaps naturalistic approaches can't handle. Also, another positive note, in my opinion, was that the intervention pulled away from the teacher-directed model. When I was working one-on-one with the student I mentioned before, it was just the two of us. Everything we did was conversation. It was hardly strictly, I ask you a question and you give me an answer, which was excellent because we built a relationship quickly. We established rapport. We mostly got our work done, even though he definitely had difficulty staying on task. But it was less the teacher standing in front of the classroom and students responding. And students with autism, especially those who require initiating conversation and responding on topic, require that kind of one-on-one practice where they listen, understand what someone else has said, respond to what they said without changing the subject drastically. And this intervention seems to have certainly helped students with autism who struggle with this. And how often do students receive instructions on what to do in a conversation and then several sessions to practice that skill? It was a very explicit and systematic instruction. However, the teachers in question, there were 9 classrooms that participated in this study. They all spent a lot of time training themselves. They also spent a lot of time training the students that were peer mediators, and it was a lot of initial work. Eventually, we said, the system makes instruction and achievement better. It helps students with autism. But it goes to wonder, if this system works, would there be something that requires less work on the teacher's part, or something that can be bought instead of the teacher needing to spend many, many hours setting up and monitoring the system to make sure that it's working to its highest ability. And like the authors said in their disclaimer section, it's a very complex system. It takes a lot of time to put in place. So that would be one reservation on behalf of the social stations intervention specifically. However, onto real-world application. There we are, implications of practice. Students with autism require social skills instruction and practice, and these sort of systematic discussions are really necessary. They need models, they need like actual practice with another student, as well as instruction about what to say, how to say, strategies for staying on topic and practice doing so, then feedback on how they did. So even if the social system station isn't what is ultimately the best for classrooms, it brings up an excellent point about what might be done to help integrate that into classrooms. Students with autism who rarely express themselves verbally often experience trouble with reading due to lower language development. Vocabulary and grammar are first learned through listening and speaking, then in reading and writing, so students who have not expressed themselves orally for long periods of time or not at all will struggle in those sessions. And of course, listening comprehension plays a part in that, and students with autism are listening, but with that lessened oral practice, this kind of integration is highly necessary. And integrating all three, as the authors reported, improves class morale and academic achievement. Students come together as a community. Furthermore, students with autism do require training to improve initiation and response. Relationships won't just get better with time. Skills won't just get better with time. They require explicit, systematic instruction, especially in that oral language development area. Just because a student has a better relationship with someone does not guarantee that they will speak more. They may be more open to speaking, certainly, but students with autism who need to get better at their oral language development will need direct instruction for long periods of time to improve. And I think that's an assumption that sometimes people make, is that it'll get better with time, and that's a faulty assumption to make. And this article surely brought that out. Even though I am not 100% on board with just doing social stations, it brings up a lot of great points about what can be done to help improve students with autism and the language difficulties they encounter. Here are the references. A couple of them were just used for thumbnails. A couple of them helped explore the social stations topics. Overall, a lot of great points made. I look forward to seeing what Sutton does, since this is, of course, a recent article. It was only published in 2020 and then 2021 in the journal, so I look to see what further research will be done. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great evening.